people talking. You didn't know what was going on. But as people began to absorb more and more of the information, they began to say, we need to do something. We talked about trying to donate blood. We talked about trying to gather items that we could take to New York for donations. And none of that seemed quite right sitting here in Iowa. And then somebody said they're going to need lights. Tonight, they're going to want to continue the rescue efforts. They're going to need lights. That gave us something to do. It gave us a reason to focus on something during that time. And so we set into action to try and find out where our trucks were and the availability of those trucks to go out and provide some lighting at what would become Ground Zero, but to get those trucks to New York City. We continued to watch, and we watched Tower 1 collapse. We couldn't believe what we were seeing. We couldn't believe and wondered what the devastation was that had just occurred in front of our eyes. And at the same time, we were trying to find the guys that worked on the trucks. We got a hold of them. The trucks were in Rhode Island. There were 2 trucks in Rhode Island. We had 12 trucks at that time. There were 2 trucks in Rhode Island. They had just got done lighting the X Games for television the night before. And we asked the guys if they were aware of what was going on in New York. And they too were watching television and had already had the same thoughts, that the lights needed to be in New York. They said they'd get the trucks ready, but we needed to figure out a way to get the trucks to New York, because at that time, all of the highway systems on the East Coast had been shut down. So we told them we'd work on that avenue if they'd get the trucks ready to go. We called the New York City Police Department, and through no fault of theirs, they had no interest in talking to someone from Iowa. We tried calling the New York City Fire Departments. Again, no interest in talking to someone from Iowa. And I don't belittle them at all for that. I think if I were in the middle of what they were going through in New York City, I wouldn't have been interested in talking to someone from Iowa either. And so we decided if they're in Rhode Island, they need to drive through Connecticut. We'll call Connecticut. Maybe we can at least get the trucks that far. The person that answered the phone with the Connecticut Highway Patrol had actually seen the trucks working at the X Games and knew what we had and knew we had to get it to New York City. They said that they would provide us a state patrol escort from the Connecticut State Patrol. If our guys could get to the Connecticut state line, they would figure out a way to get them into New York City. So we called the guys back. We let them know that we had transportation lined up, and they said they were ready to go. They told us they'd called their families to let them know what they were going to do. None of us knew once they got to New York City if there'd be any communication, if we'd be able to talk to them. Cell phones weren't what they were back then. They weren't what they are now. And we didn't know if there were any cell phone towers left to even transmit calls. So they got the trucks ready, they took off. And about that same time, we knew that a plane had hit the Pentagon, and one of our team members got a phone call, and it was his mom. And she was letting him know that his sister had been on the plane that hit the Pentagon. And so suddenly for us, we were not only responding to something because we felt it was important to respond as Iowans and as Americans, but we were responding because suddenly there was one person that we could put a name and face to and knew who had been on that flight. Mary Ray Soper had boarded the flight in Boston and was headed to California. She had left her job as an attorney with the military and was giving it all up to accomplish her lifetime goal of being a gymnastics coach. She was headed out to California to start her job as a gymnastics coach in the UC college system. She had her cat with her and a couple suitcases with the belongings that she thought was important to take along. And unfortunately, her dreams ended that day. But for us, it gave us renewed motivation on why we needed to figure out a way to make this happen. It also meant that people in Oskaloosa said, well, now we need to take trucks to Washington, D.C. also. We didn't have any other trucks on the East Coast. The only other available trucks we had were sitting in Oskaloosa. And we had more than we needed drivers volunteer to take those trucks out to Washington, D.C. We put 2 drivers in each truck so they could drive straight through, and they headed out for Washington, D.C. One of the things that we learned through that process, excuse me, is that when you're going to do something with the military, they're organized. We were able to reach someone at the Pentagon and let them know that we were bringing trucks out, and they said, great, we'll have a parking spot for you and we'll let you know what you need to do when you get here. Very different experience than what it was when we were headed into New York City. So our trucks are headed out following the Connecticut Highway Patrol. Our guys were able to call us from the road there. And during these times, sometimes you just need to have a light moment, and then so everybody can remember to keep breathing. And our guys called and they said, hey, if we can follow the state patrol when we're on the road instead of having the state patrol follow us, this is the way to drive a semi-cross country. As they got into New York City, they were really frustrated. We didn't know what was going on anymore because they couldn't get a hold of us. But they got to New York City and were directed to Shea Stadium, baseball stadium. That was where New York was staging everyone that was showing up with items that people wanted to donate or people who were volunteering labor. And so our guys found themselves parked in a parking lot amongst contractors, amongst people with heavy equipment, and amongst people who had food and clothing that they wanted to donate. They kept trying to get the attention of police officers or firefighters to say, hey, these are lights, you need them, it's going to be dark tonight. They weren't having a lot of luck. By that time, the guys had been up for over 24 hours. They were exhausted, and they decided that they would stay in their trucks, take a 1-hour nap, and maybe when they woke up, there would be some fresh idea, some idea that they'd have. About the time one of the guys was falling asleep, there was a knock on the door of his truck. He opened the door, and standing there was a person from FEMA. And the FEMA person said, I remember seeing these trucks in Oklahoma City after the bombing there. You lit up that building. We need you. Come on. And so that's when things for us changed, and being able to volunteer changed. From then on, we were under the direction of the New York City Fire Department. FEMA put us in contact with the fire department, and they got our trucks into a position where they wanted them for lighting. That first night, as they were bringing the trucks in, the only directions they were given is if you see law enforcement or firefighters running, you need to do the same because it means another building is falling. And beyond that, they told them to just be careful and to try and be safe. So our guys took the trucks in, they set them up, and that's about all they talked to us about for those next 3 or 4 days experience that they had. After that, there are a lot of stories that they share, but no one's real sure about the experience that they had for those first days, except to know that it certainly wasn't what they signed up for. These were guys, most of them in their early 20s. The idea that they're going to drive a truck all over the United States and see lots of really good football games and really good rock concerts was appealing to them. These were not people who signed up to head into a place like Ground Zero and be at the target for some of the worst devastation that the world had ever seen. So they call us once things settle down a few days in and they can get a hold of us. They let us know that they found hotel rooms and that they're going to be there for a while, that this isn't just going to be a 2 or 3 or a week process, but these trucks are going to be there for a while.